Welcome to everybody. Today's focus, best practice for CMMS Software and Implementation. You've selected your vendor. Now what? Determining the scope of your project, planning your project, preparing for change, training, data gathering, reports and analysis, follow-up, and continuous improvement. In summary, questions and answers. So I'm going to hand over to Harry Colville right now. He's the VP of Business Development at Eagle Technology. Harry, thank you for joining us.
So through your research, you've selected your CMMS, or you're looking for a CMMS, and you're looking, where do I begin, right? Just selecting the CMMS vendor is only the beginning of the challenge. We're going to talk today about best practices for a CMMS software implementation, and if you think that this is going to be a cookbook that you can follow exactly, that's not what's going to happen today. I'm going to give you some guidelines to think about as you go through your CMMS project implementation. So determining the scope of your project is one of the critical points, right? What's in and what's out? Do I have to put inventory in? Do I have to put all my assets in at once? Do I need to barcode them right away or QR code them? There's lots of questions that need to be thought through before implementation. It's not as simple as buying the software and all of a sudden it works. It's more like you bought a payroll system and you have to put the people in, you have to put their hourly rate in, you have to put the payroll cycle in. There's a lot of data that has to be collected in a CMMS system. But any good system is going to allow you to collect that data over time and update it and keep it current. And CMMS systems are living, breathing solutions that will never be complete. Okay? So depending on your particular business, what's most critical? If I have OSHA regulations that I need to fall under, perhaps putting the inspections and the equipment that might cause you OSHA violations would be a place to start. Identifying how do I want to analyze information not only today, but 5 years from now. What's going to be important to the company, to me, to make my job easier so that if a CFO or CEO or somebody comes to me and says, how much did we spend maintaining this piece of equipment, or when's the last time we did this or that, those are the types of things that you need to be able to identify. If you're in facilities operations, is this billable back to the tenant or not? Okay, a lot of decisions have to go into determining the scope of your project. I've talked to people in facilities that say, hey, it's not important for me to be able to keep parts on hand. It's just not important. Well, guess what? We've got clients in Houston and Florida that couldn't get parts that they needed immediately from their distributors because the distributor wasn't able to get to them, okay? So you need to think not only about daily operation and the normal situations when you've set up your CMMS and what you're going to include, but you need to think about emergency operations as well. So what's in and what's out will depend on you and what's important to you and your business. You need to take time to plan. It's not about buying software. And again, buying software, you could buy a payroll system, you have to set up the employee, you have to set up their pay rate, you have to set up the payroll cycle, you have to decide what forms and deductions need to be taken, and that takes a lot of work to set up a payroll system. Well, a CMMS is even more complex in a lot of ways because you need to identify who's going to do things, what are your standards, what are the milestones, because it's not going to get done overnight. Are you going to do a pilot project if you're rolling out multiple locations? Will that pilot project work across all of your installations. What's common? What's different? Who's on board? Who's not on board? And how do we get the people that are not on board with this project using the system? Culture change is a huge component of system implementation, and you need to work through your organization to make sure that you're going to get consistent quality data throughout the use of the system. So change management. This is a huge topic unto itself, and we could talk about this for hours. Every organization is overworked, has not enough resources to get things done now, and now you're going to implement a new system. Wow. I know that people come to me and say, hey, can we do this and can we do that? And they want to always put work on you, and now you're asking people to do things that they're not doing currently. So somehow in your organization, you need to make sure that your organization will be prepared for change. Again, don't make the assumption that all of your employees are going to welcome a CMMS with open arms. Number one, I don't want to be tracked. Number two, oh, this is more work. Number three, you know, I don't have time to do this. It gets in the way of doing my job. So I don't want to use a computer, okay? All of those things are objections I've heard over the years from different people, and they have to be overcome in order for you to be successful in implementing a CMMS. I've got a lot of clients that use mobile devices with their technicians to capture data, but I also have people that have technicians on staff that are really good at what they do, but they don't want to use a computer, or you know, they'll quit if they have to use a computer. So you need to be prepared on an individual basis to address those issues, either with printed work orders for that individual or somebody to assist them. But you can't assume that just because you want to implement the CMMS that everybody is bought into this and is going to welcome it with open arms. Cultural change in an organization in today's world is a huge, huge problem to implementing any system, let alone CMMS. We don't need training. I've heard that many, many times. I know how to get a work order in the system, and that's all I need to know how to do. Well, today's CMMS systems are more complex in some ways, and yet more easier to use in a lot of other ways, okay? And it's not just about putting a PM in the system. Today's systems are intelligent systems that can integrate with building management systems. It can integrate with your virtual laser scan images of the facility, and you can do a virtual walkthrough, touch an object on your screen and have the work order pop up. You can interface with building analytics and MES systems. So training is just one small component that has to occur. When training occurs, you begin the process of culture change, okay? You identify the objections. You identify, well, this isn't going to work for me because. So when you do that pilot project and you train your core people on the system, you're beginning to get input that you possibly didn't get prior to either your pilot project or your implementation of your first facility. It's critical that it's not about training on the software as much as it is about changing the culture and making sure the processes are documented and that your people are going to be able to follow these processes as you go forward with implementation. Because without good processes that are consistent, the data that you're going to capture is going to be inconsistent. speaking of data, you've got a big job in front of you to gather data. Data on equipment, data on facilities and locations, data on parts potentially and where they're stored, data on who can put in a service request, data on who can create a purchase order if you're going to create purchase orders, requisitions in the system, and what's their authority level. Who can print reports, who gets reports, who needs data, okay? There's a lot of decisions around data as you gather it. Establishing a consistent naming convention, for example, for assets. So if I've got 15 buildings, they all have street addresses, I might start my building, my asset identification with the building street address, okay? So if it's 1020 North Gibberti Street, I would start with 1020, and then I might put a hyphen or an underscore, but you need to be consistent because they're different. And then I might say it's a RTU, okay, for rooftop unit. And then I might put a dash again, and I might put 001, and then 002, and 003, and I may have 40 rooftop units on my facility. So each of them is a unique identification. The other thing I might include is the floor that it's on. So if I've got mechanical rooms on different floors, I might do the building address, the dash, the RTU, dash 03 because it's on the 3rd floor, and then the consecutive number of the asset in the building. So there's lots of different ways to set up your nomenclature, but as you gather data, the consistency of how you name things, the consistency of is it a dash or is it an underscore, is going to make a difference in how you can retrieve and analyze data over the next 5, 10, 15 years, okay? So you can, if you don't have consistent data gathering methodology, you can defeat the purpose of a CMMS system. You need to identify in the data area what types of work do I want to capture. Do I want, if I've got carpentry and HVAC and plumbing and electrical and drywall and painting and so forth, if I capture that in the work order as a work type, will that help me analyze where my resources are going? Same thing for contractors. Contractors' different skills need to be identified and the work types. So data gathering is one of the largest steps. And again, going back to our scope of our project, you need to identify what's critical to get in to begin with and what can I add as I go forward. Who can add information is another piece of the data gathering puzzle. If I have 15 people entering things and they don't understand the standard for entering that data, I've lost my consistency. I've lost my potential for getting good data in the future. So you can certainly have 15 people entering the data, but they all have to have the guidelines and follow those guidelines to get the data into the system in a consistent manner. Reports and analysis, okay? This is what we want to look for because ultimately a CMMS system is all about data. But going back to that data gathering step, if it's not consistent, we're not going to get good reports from the system. You may need to wait in your requirements because when you start a CMMS system, it's sort of empty. But as you go forward and build data over time, your report requirements, your data analysis requirements are going to change. And a good CMMS system will allow you to analyze data in different ways. Okay, I can look at work orders by work type, I can look at by skill type, So if I have an electrical technician doing all mechanical work, I've got a problem potentially because I'm overpaying for an electrician versus a mechanical person potentially. But you don't know what you don't know until you start gathering data. And if you don't have time in your day now, wait. You're going to have less time because the responsibility will fall on you to start analyzing the data, and perhaps you can get help elsewhere in your organization. You've got to start analyzing the data in your CMMS system. That's what it's all about. So looking at the consistency of the data, looking at who's recording what. Are you getting good notes in your work order as a follow-up? In other words, fixed doesn't analyze anything. It's, your notes should tell you, what did I do to fix this problem, right? What parts did I use? How long did it take me? And when's the last time somebody did this? And that gets us to the next point, and that's follow-up and continuous improvement. A CMMS system is never done. There's always a need for somebody to keep looking at the data, to looking at the work types, to looking at what's going into the system to see, are we better than we were yesterday? In other words, are we getting quality data? Are we doing our work on time? Are the PMs getting done? Is demand maintenance being reduced because we're getting to the PMs? Typically, in an organization that doesn't have a CMMS in place is probably doing a lot of break-fix or reactive maintenance. And in some cases, that's all they care about, depending on are you owner-occupied or are you tenant-occupied, okay? But in terms of the CMMS, it's critical that you have follow-up and analyzation of the data on a continuous basis. You can refine work types. You can refine estimated times on jobs. All of these things will come so that ultimately you can get to something called predictive maintenance, because there is no way to get to predictive maintenance until you have quality preventive and demand maintenance information. This is a big job. A lot of organizations employ PhDs to look at the data and do analytical evaluation, okay? If you are not comfortable with data analysis and statistics, you need to reach out within your organization to get help potentially, okay? Because maintenance today is about data. So in summary, I've given you an overview of some of the pitfalls, some of the things to think about in implementing a CMMS system. But the critical component is that it's a living, breathing project that will never end. As people come and go from your organization, they'll need to be brought in and updated and trained in the standards of the system, because the minute somebody leaves and somebody new comes in and they don't follow the standard, your data quality starts declining. So it's critical that there's an ongoing documentation of processes, procedures, standards, and the monitoring of those standards in order to get quality data. It's a complex topic that we're talking about today. And again, I can't give you a specific cookbook for your facility, but hopefully I've given you some things to think about, questions to ask yourself about the quality of your CMMS implementation now, if you have one, the quality of what you want to achieve in a project, and some of the thoughts that have to go into a project. If you're not prepared as a project manager to do all of these things, again, you can reach out to other people in your organization to lead that project and do the project checklist, the project planning, the milestone identification, and so forth. And some of these projects can go on for a year. So don't think that entering into a project is simple. I just buy the CMMS, I put a PM in, and I'm done. There's not a quality system on the market today that's what's going to happen. So hopefully I've given you some things to think about. Hopefully you know, can benefit from the information that I've given you. I'd be more than happy to talk to any of you on a one-to-one basis and look at your, you know, specific situations. But at this point in time, I think I've raised enough of a stir in the pot that I'm going to turn it over to any of you who might have questions. Barbara, are there any questions from anybody?
No, currently there's nothing here.
Okay, so obviously I've not done my job.
Or you've done it well enough that people feel informed. We do appreciate everybody's attendance, and again, I do want to apologize for the technical difficulty we experienced earlier. If there is any questions, if you do feel that you want more information, I think, Harry, if you can move to the next slide, one down so that they can have your contact details. You can email webinars@eagle.cmms.com, or you can even email harryk@eagle.cmms.com if you have any questions. As he mentioned, he's more than happy and willing to discuss your options with you and help you and looking at how to implement CMMS, and we can work with you to do that. So I think with no questions, we want to thank you for your time, and we will be doing some more of these best practice CMMS series. If you have any suggestions or if you feel that there's something that you would like us to focus on, again, you can email us at webinars@eagle.cmms.com. Thank you very much.